Lots to talk about. Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Congressman Khanna of California. He's a member of the Oversight Committee and of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And Robert Reich, former Secretary of Labor under President Clinton. He is a professor of public policy at UC Berkeley, and he's a co-founder of Inequality Media. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Congressman, let me start with you. Talk to me about the state of things right now. We have on-again, off-again negotiations. We have about 10 days. We have a call for Republicans to come over and sign on an effort to just get this vote passed, a clean vote passed, and we have discussions about the 14th Amendment. All of these are remarkably serious things. What's the state of play?
Ollie, it sounds complex, but it's really pretty simple. We don't negotiate about whether we pay our bills in America. We pay our bills. Democrats did this when Donald Trump was president, and now President Biden needs to pay the debt. And this is not Congress against the president. This is Congress trying to abrogate what past Congresses have done. Past Congresses that said, pay this money, President Biden needs to pay it. We had a discharge petition saying basically President Biden pay the debt. 210 Democrats signed it on day one. 2 other Democrats are expected to sign in Monday. That gets us to 212. With one person we still have to convince. We just need 6 Republicans to sign that, and I think there's going to be growing pressure for them to do that.
Bob, I want to ask you about the constitutionality of this, because this is actually in the Constitution. It's not an abstraction. The 14th Amendment says America has to pay its debts. Even if it weren't in the Constitution, one should assume that's what you do. And a country does not pay its debts. It is in default. That's the worst kind of stuff. You have high interest rates. You have inflation. People leave your economy. But even if this went to court, your thought on this is that there are a lot of originalists, textualists on the Supreme Court. The Constitution says what it says. You have to pay your debts.
The Constitution says what it has. I mean, I have my Constitution right here. I can read it to you. The validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. If you have an originalist on the Supreme Court who says we've got to go exactly by the words of the Constitution and we've got to understand where those words came from, then the president is clear. The president has a constitutional duty. He has made and taken an oath of office to follow the Constitution. And anybody who says otherwise is not paying very much attention. The economic calamity that would ensue failing to pay our bills, not honoring the full faith and credit of the United States, has never happened before because we've never had a default before. People may be confused about this, Ali. I mean, some people say, well, we've had government shutdowns before. Yes, we have. In fact, I've been through government shutdowns in my capacity as a government official. They're not pleasant. They're not nice. But this is different. A default on the debt of the United States means that the full faith and credit of the United States around the world, to all of our creditors, all the bondholders, all the people who are expecting to get Social Security checks, none of them will be safe.
Congressman, I have trouble calling this a negotiation because it's not supposed to be a debatable matter. It's akin to saying, I won't shoot you in the head if you give me a peanut butter sandwich. It's like, I would like if you don't shoot me in the head, maybe we can discuss a peanut butter sandwich. The Republicans say they're negotiating lowering spending, right? Tell me what that looks like, because there are things that they are asking for right now in order to agree to raising the debt limit.
Well, first of all, as you pointed out in your opening, there's a separate process for that, the budget process. And Democrats have said, we'll talk about it. But the issue is, a revenue problem. The reason, if you want to lower the deficits, what we ought to be doing is repealing the Trump and Bush tax cuts to the very wealthy. They won't do that. They're instead trying to hurt the poorest Americans, the most vulnerable Americans, at a time that people are hurting in the economy. And they're not willing to talk about the almost $1 trillion defense budget, which is most of the discretionary budget. We've said let's have some of the cuts there. It's really important to understand that the vast majority, I think 70% of the deficit, has been accumulated under Republican presidents, not Democratic presidents.
Bob Reich, let's talk about what happens. You said it's a very different thing. It's not a government shutdown. We know government shutdowns are bad, but a lot of Americans who say, I've seen a couple of them, it doesn't have that much impact on my life. Talk to me about, because a default has a macro impact. It does things broadly to the economy, which will trickle down and hit people, and it does specific things to certain people as it relates to their income.
Ali, the worst thing about a default is that we don't know exactly what it would do. We know it would create chaos. We know that it would reduce and eliminate the full faith and credit of the United States, that all the global bondholders of the United States would no longer trust the United States, that America would no longer have the capacity to continue doing what we want to do. In fact, it could explode the deficit. Because, there are so many ways in which the economy would contract and collapse, and tax revenue would therefore decline and the deficit would go up. I mean, this is not just a nuclear option. This is sort of the end of time option, Armageddon option. And you don't want to do that. There's no reason to do it. The fact that you don't have a single Republican in the House willing to join the Democrats in avoiding this Armageddon itself is frightening.
Ro Khanna, you had mentioned that there are two ways to solve money that you think is, a budget that's off, and that is you either cut spending or you increase revenue or you do both. The Republicans are proposing a bunch of things, including some work requirements on things that people receive, whether it's Medicaid or food stamps or temporary financial assistance. Many of those cases already have work requirements, but the interesting thing here is that we have 3.5% unemployment in this country. We don't have a work ethic problem in this country. We have people who don't use their vacations, don't take time off. But we are leaning into this thing that we leaned into during COVID, and we always seem to lean into, is that let's take stuff away from the least among us right now. That's a way to cut the budget.
Well, first of all, you pointed out there already are work requirements. President Clinton, to some controversy, put those requirements in the 1990s. They exist. Here's what the Republicans want to do. They want to now take away the benefits, take away food stamps, take away health care from the most vulnerable, and there's going to be zero increase in actual employment because there have been studies that have been done that show all this is going to do is take away the benefits. And the Democrats have said it's a non-starter. Absolutely not. We're not going to allow that. And it does nothing to lower the deficit. I mean, that's a fraction of the actual budget.
Bob, you've studied this very closely, this whole idea of inequality. Ro Khanna is exactly right. It will not increase employment. It will not get what Matt Gaetz called couch potatoes off of couches, because most Americans are working. All we have is a mismatch between open jobs and people looking for work. But it will actually cause fewer people who are at the lowest end of the economic pole to get money.
Yes, and indeed, there have been two studies just done showing that the effect of a default would, at the minimum, be about 3 million jobs. It could be as high as 8.2 million jobs. It's not just the people at the bottom are going to be affected. Working class people, middle class people are going to be affected. A default would, in a way, I think it's not too far-fetched to say explode the economy. Now, if the president were to go along with what the Republicans want and hurt the most vulnerable members of this society, we would be turning our back on the biggest problem we have in America today, apart from democracy and preserving democracy, which is widening inequality and the fact that we have a small group of people at the top who are raking in most of the economic gains of the economy, have been doing so for years, and we have a larger and larger number of vulnerable Americans, including a lot of working class people who have voted for Donald Trump in the past because they're so frustrated and so angry and so mystified at why they're not getting ahead. Well, you can imagine what that is going to do in and of itself.
We have amongst the highest poverty rates in the developed world, amongst the highest maternal mortality rates, amongst the highest child poverty rates, amongst the highest food insecurity rates. But what are we looking at? Cutting benefits to people on Medicaid and SNAP. All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Congressman Ro Khanna and Robert